5 years ago, my parents threw me out on Christmas Eve to satisfy my sister, calling me a disgrace for refusing a loveless marriage. I left with a man they mocked as a pauper, unaware he was the sole heir to a real estate empire. Now, as they crash my $5 million wedding expecting to humiliate a failure, they are walking into a trap. I promise you, the price for their cruelty will cost more than any invitation. My name is Alina Hartwell. At 29 years old, I am the Senior Creative Director at Apex Horizon, one of the most prestigious interior design firms in New York City. My signature is on the lobbies of six-star hotels in Dubai and the private libraries of tech moguls in Silicon Valley. I have spent the last half-decade curating environments that whisper power, elegance, and absolute control. People pay me fortunes to organize their chaos into something beautiful. Yet, as I stood by the floor-to-ceiling glass of my penthouse overlooking Central Park, holding a vibrating phone that felt like a grenade with the pin pulled, I realized that the chaos of my own origin story was something I could never quite design away. The city below was a grid of amber and white lights, a sprawling circuit board of ambition. It was quiet up here. The air conditioning hummed with a soft, expensive efficiency that scrubbed the air of any pollutants. Leaving it sterile and cool, I liked the cold. It reminded me that I was awake. It reminded me that I was safe. But the name flashing on my screen threatened to shatter that carefully constructed sanctuary. Mother. I stared at the screen. We had not spoken in months, and even then, our last conversation had been a transactional exchange of monosyllables. My thumb hovered over the decline button, a reflex honed by years of self-preservation, but a morbid curiosity stayed my hand. Why now? Why tonight? When the snow was beginning to fall just as it had 5 years ago, I slid the icon across the screen and brought the phone to my ear. I did not say hello. I knew better than to offer an opening. Alina. Her voice came through, not with warmth, but with that familiar, breathless urgency that always preceded a demand. There was no preamble, no question about my health or my life. I am calling because I need to make sure you understand the situation regarding next weekend. I remained silent, watching a taxi navigate the slush on Fifth Avenue 40 stories below. Your father and I are celebrating our 30th wedding anniversary, she continued, her tone sharpening against my silence. It is a big milestone. We are hosting a dinner. I know, I said. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears. Detached and professional. The same voice I used to tell a contractor that his marble sourcing was substandard. I assumed my invitation got lost in the mail. Don't be difficult, Alina, she snapped. There is no invitation. That is why I am calling. We do not want you there. The words hung in the air, suspended like dust motes in a shaft of light. I should have been immune to it by now. I should have built up a tolerance to her venom. But the rejection still found a way to slip between the cracks of my armor. Bianca is bringing her new boyfriend, my mother went on, oblivious to the silence on my end. He is a very impressive young man. He is into cryptocurrency, a visionary. Bianca says she is very serious about him, and she wants everything to be perfect. She specifically asked that we keep the circle tight. She does not want any drama. She does not want you there to make things awkward. Awkward, I repeated. Is that what I am? You know what you are, she hissed, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. You are a reminder of everything that went wrong. Bianca deserves her moment. She deserves to present herself as a woman of standing without her sister looming over the table like a dark cloud. We all agreed. It is better if you stay away. Don't send a gift. Don't send a card. Just stay in your little apartment and leave us be. The line went dead. She did not even wait for a goodbye. I lowered the phone, my grip so tight my knuckles had turned the color of old ivory. The view of New York blurred for a second, not from tears, but from a sudden, violent rush of memory, the word she had avoided using, the word that hung unspoken in the static of the call, screamed in my head, disgrace. The timeline in my mind fractured, and suddenly, I was not standing in a multi-million-dollar penthouse in 2026. I was back there, 5 years ago. The smell of expensive pine candles and roasting turkey turned my stomach. It was Christmas Eve, and the living room of my parents' house in Connecticut was suffocatingly hot. I was 24 then, smaller, softer, with eyes that still looked for approval. My father sat in his leather armchair, a glass of scotch trembling in his hand. His business was failing. He had made bad investments, trusted the wrong people, and the walls were closing in. But he had found a lifeline shaped like a marriage contract. "He is a good boy, Alina," my father had said, refusing to look me in the eye. "His father is willing to inject $2 million into the company. $2 million. That saves the house. That saves Bianca's tuition. That saves our reputation." The boy in question was the son of a known loan shark, a man who had tried to grope me under the table at a gala 2 weeks prior. He was crude, violent, and dull. "I can't do it, Dad," I had pleaded, my voice cracking. "I'll work. I'll take a second job. I'll help pay off the debts, but I can't marry him." That was when Bianca entered the room. She was 19, fresh home from college, wearing a cashmere sweater that cost more than I made in a month. She looked at me with wide, tear-filled eyes, but there was no sympathy in them, only panic. "You are so selfish," Bianca had screamed, throwing a throw pillow onto the floor to punctuate her tantrum. "Daddy is going to lose everything because you are too proud. Who do you think you are? You think you're better than us. You think you're too good to help this family. I'm not selling my body for a check, Bianca." I had shot back. "It is not selling," my mother had interjected, stepping out from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Her face was twisted in a grimace of disappointment. "It is duty. It is loyalty. Things you clearly know nothing about. We raised you, we fed you, and now, when we ask for one thing, one small sacrifice, you turn your back on us." "I won't do it," I said, my voice shaking but firm. The silence that followed was absolute. My father finished his scotch in one gulp. He set the glass down with a heavy clink. "Then you are no use to us," he said. The words were flat, devoid of emotion. "If you are not part of the solution, you are the problem. You are a leech. Alina, an ungrateful, selfish leech." "A disgrace," my mother added, the word landing like a physical blow. "You are a disgrace to this family." "Get out," Bianca sneered. "Just get out. I don't want to look at you." They didn't give me time to pack. My father literally marched me to the door. I grabbed my coat, a thin wool trench that wasn't warm enough for the blizzard raging outside. He opened the heavy oak door, and the wind howled, carrying snow into the foyer. "Don't come back until you fix this," he said, and then he slammed the door. I stood on the porch, staring at the wreath hanging on the wood. It was festive and bright, mocking me. I had nowhere to go. My friends were all out of town for the holidays. My bank account had less than $300 in it, because I had just loaned Bianca money for a ski trip she claimed was for networking. I walked 4 miles to the train station in the snow. I took the last train into the city and let myself into the office of the small design firm where I was working as a junior assistant. The heat had been turned down for the holiday break. It was freezing. I curled up on the scratchy carpet under my desk, wrapping myself in sample fabrics, velvet swatches, and heavy drapes intended for someone else's window. I slept on the floor of a drafty office on Christmas Eve, shivering, while my family sat by the fire, convinced they were the victims of my selfishness. That night, something inside me calcified. The part of me that craved their love froze over and shattered. I woke up the next morning stiff and cold, but clear-headed. I vowed I would never be cold again. I vowed I would never be poor again. And I vowed I would never let them see me bleed. The memory faded, receding like the tide, leaving me back in the present. The silence of the penthouse felt different now. It was no longer just quiet. It was heavy with the weight of the past. I looked at my reflection in the dark glass. The woman staring back was unrecognizable from the girl on that porch. My hair was cut into a sharp, asymmetrical bob. My silk blouse was tailored to perfection. I wore diamond studs that I had bought for myself. I was the director of Apex Horizon. I commanded a salary that could buy my parents' house 3 times over. And yet, the pain was there. It was a dull ache in the center of my chest. It wasn't because I wasn't invited to the party. I would rather drink poison than sit at a table with them and listen to Bianca brag about a cryptocurrency scammer. No, the pain came from the realization that after 5 years of silence, after 5 years of rebuilding myself from the ashes, they still believed they held the remote control to my life. They thought they could just call and command me to disappear, as if I were still that frightened girl they threw out into the snow. They didn't see me. They only saw the inconvenience I represented. I felt a sudden warmth seep through the silk of my blouse. A large, strong hand settled gently on my shoulder. I didn't jump. I knew that touch better than my own heartbeat. "You are gripping that phone like you are trying to crush it," a deep voice murmured close to my ear. I took a breath, composing my features before I turned around. Julian stood there, backlit by the soft, recessed lighting of the hallway. He was wearing a simple charcoal sweater and dark denim jeans, the casual uniform he preferred when we were alone. His dark hair was slightly tousled, and his eyes, those piercing, intelligent eyes that missed nothing, were fixed on my face. Julian Sterling. To the world, he was an enigma, a man who kept his name out of the tabloids despite the billions attached to it. To my parents, if they ever bothered to look past their own noses, he was just the carpenter I had been dating when I finally cut ties with them completely. To me, he was the anchor in my storm. "It's nothing," I said. Forcing a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes, I placed the phone face down on the marble console table. "Just a spam call. You know how persistent they can be." Julian didn't smile back. He moved closer, his hand sliding from my shoulder to cup my cheek. His thumb brushed over the skin beneath my eye, wiping away a singular, treacherous tear I hadn't even realized had fallen. "Alina," he said softly, "you are trembling." I looked down at my hands. He was right. A fine tremor was running through my fingers. I tried to make a fist to stop it, but the physical reaction to the adrenaline of the call was betraying me. "It was her," I admitted, my voice dropping to a whisper. "Margaret." Julian's expression hardened instantly. The warmth in his eyes was replaced by a protective flintiness. He knew the history. He knew every scar they had left on me. He had been the one to find me in that freezing office 5 years ago, back when he was undercover as a laborer on one of our sites, pretending to be a nobody. He had brought me coffee. He had brought me a heater. He had listened when no one else would. "What did she say?" he asked. The tone was dangerously calm. "She called to invite me to their anniversary." I let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Bianca is bringing her new boyfriend. They think I'm an embarrassment. They don't want the disgrace ruining the aesthetic." I expected Julian to be angry. I expected him to rant about their cruelty. But Julian was a strategist, not a hothead. He looked at me, studying the set of my jaw and the hurt I was trying so desperately to bury. "And what are you going to do?" he asked. "I told them I wouldn't go," I said, shrugging, trying to affect an air of nonchalance. "It doesn't matter. I don't care." "You do care," Julian corrected me gently. "Not because you want to be there, but because they are still trying to make you feel small. They are trying to dictate your worth based on their distorted reality." He took both my hands in his. His grip was solid, grounding. "Alina, look at where you are standing. You built this life. You own this city. Do you really think a dinner party in Connecticut has any power over you unless you let it?" His words cut through the fog of my emotions. He was right. The anger I felt wasn't about the party. It was about compliance. By engaging with them, by answering the phone, by letting their words sting. I was participating in their dynamic. I was letting them treat me like the black sheep, the outcast, the failure, but I wasn't that person anymore. I looked past Julian. Out at the city lights again. Somewhere out there, in the suburbs. My parents were probably congratulating themselves on handling the Alina problem. They were probably setting the table for Bianca's new boyfriend, eager to impress him, eager to present a perfect facade of a family. They thought they had silenced me. They had no idea. A cold resolve settled in my chest. Replacing the tremor, it was sharper than the anger, cleaner than the grief. "You're right," I said, my voice steady now. "I don't need to play their game." I reached for my phone on the console table. "What are you doing?" Julian asked, watching me with curiosity. "I am accepting their terms," I said. "They want me gone. Fine, I will be gone. Completely." I navigated to the settings menu. I found the contact block list. I didn't just block my mother. I blocked my father. I blocked Bianca. Then, I went a step further. I opened my email settings and set up a filter to auto-delete anything coming from their addresses. I severed the digital arteries that connected us. "They want silence," I said, holding the phone up like a remote detonator. "I will give them silence, but not the kind they want. They think my absence is their victory. They don't realize that my absence is the only thing protecting them from the truth of who I have become." I powered the phone down completely and tossed it onto the sofa cushions. It landed with a soft thud. "They have no idea what is coming." "Do they?" Julian asked, a hint of a dark smile playing on his lips. He knew about the wedding. He knew about the guest list. He knew that in 48 hours, the invitations for our wedding, the real wedding, the one that would grace the cover of every society magazine in the country, were going out. And he knew their names were not on that list. "No," I said, walking into his arms and resting my head against his chest. I could hear his heartbeat, steady and strong. "They think I am dead in a ditch somewhere. They think I am the disgrace." I looked up at him, and for the first time that night, my smile was genuine. It was the smile of a predator who has just realized the cage door was left open. "Let's see how they handle it when the ghost comes back to haunt them," I whispered. "But for tonight, I am unreachable." Julian kissed my forehead. "Let them enjoy their anniversary. It will be the last peaceful meal they ever eat." I turned my back to the window, turning my back on the city, on the past, and on the family that had thrown me away. I was Alina Hartwell, and I was done being the victim, if they wanted a stranger. I would be a stranger, but when we inevitably crossed paths again, they wouldn't be meeting the daughter they kicked out. They would be meeting the woman who survived the cold. And she was far less forgiving. The silence in the penthouse was a heavy velvet curtain that separated us from the rest of the world. But my mind was drifting back to a place much louder, grittier, and far less comfortable. Looking at Julian now, standing in the soft glow of the hallway lights with the posture of a king. It was almost impossible to reconcile him with the man I had met 4 years ago. I was 25 then, a year out from the night my parents had exiled me. I was clawing my way up from the bottom of the design world, working 80 hours a week as a junior associate for a firm that specialized in flipping historic brownstones. My job was mostly fetching coffee and taking abuse from contractors, but I loved it because it was mine. I met him on a job site in Brooklyn. The air was thick with sawdust and the screech of power drills. I was frantically looking for a set of blueprints my boss had misplaced, panic rising in my throat because I knew I would be the one screamed at for the error. "You look like you lost a winning lottery ticket," a voice had said from the shadows of a half-framed wall. I turned to see a man in a stained white t-shirt and work boots that had seen better days. He was sweeping up debris, his face smudged with plaster dust, his dark hair hidden under a faded baseball cap. He looked like just another day laborer, one of the dozens of faceless men who built the dreams I designed. "I lost the electrical schematics," I had replied, barely stopping to look at him. "And if I don't find them in 5 minutes, I lose my job." He didn't say anything. He just leaned his broom against a stud, walked over to a pile of discarded drywall sheets in the corner, and pulled out a rolled-up tube of paper. "You left these by the generator when you were arguing with the foreman earlier," he said, handing them to me. His hands were rough, calloused, and covered in grit. That was Jay. For the next 6 months, Jay was the best part of my day. I thought he was a carpenter's apprentice, a man scraping by just like I was. We bonded over the shared struggle of surviving New York on a shoestring budget. I would bring extra turkey sandwiches from home because I noticed he rarely brought lunch. We would sit on the tailgate of his rusted pickup truck during breaks, sharing a thermos of cheap coffee, watching the city skyline across the river. I fell in love with him over split checks at 24-hour diners. I fell in love with the way he listened to me talk about color theory and architectural flow as if I were explaining the secrets of the universe. I fell in love with his kindness, the way he would give his last $5 to a homeless man, even when I knew or thought I knew that he needed that money for laundry. I had no idea that Jay was short for Julian Sterling. I had no idea that the boss he complained about occasionally was actually his own father, William Sterling, and that his apprenticeship was a mandatory rite of passage in the family tradition. The Sterlings owned half the commercial real estate in Manhattan. They didn't just build buildings, they owned the skyline. Julian wasn't sweeping floors because he had to. He was doing it because he was being groomed to rule an empire. And his father believed a king should know how to hold a shovel before he held a scepter. But I didn't know that. And because I didn't know, I loved him without agenda. I loved the man, not the portfolio. It wasn't until a year into our relationship that he told me the truth. We were sitting on a park bench, sharing a pretzel. He looked at me with a terrifying intensity and said, "Alina, I have to tell you something, and I'm terrified you are going to run." When he told me he was a billionaire heir, I didn't believe him. I laughed. Then, he pulled out a black card that weighed more than my phone and drove me to a private hangar where a helicopter was waiting. That night changed everything, yet it changed nothing. We made a pact to the world. He was Julian Sterling, the titan of industry. But to my family, if they ever bothered to ask, he would remain Jay, the carpenter. I wanted to protect him. I knew my parents. I knew Bianca. If they caught even a whiff of his money, they would descend on him like locusts. I would not let them turn the one pure thing in my life into a transaction. We tested this theory only once, 3 years ago, in a moment of naive optimism. I thought maybe enough time had passed. I thought maybe if they met him, if they saw how happy I was, they would accept us. I invited them to meet us for coffee at a neutral location, a modest cafe in Queens. I brought Julian. He wore his work boots and a flannel shirt, playing the part of the man I had met. My parents and Bianca walked in looking like they were doing us a favor by existing. They didn't even sit down. My mother scanned Julian's outfit with a look of pure revulsion, her nose wrinkling as if she smelled rotting garbage. "So this is it," my father had sneered, not even extending a hand to shake Julian's. "We heard you were dating someone. We assumed you had finally learned your lesson and found someone with prospects. But I see you are still digging in the mud." "He's a carpenter, Dad," I had said, my hand gripping Julian's under the table. "He works hard." Bianca laughed. It was a cruel, tinkling sound. "A carpenter, fantastic. Maybe he can come over and unclog my toilet. I'll give him $20. Julian didn't flinch. He just watched them with those dark, calculating eyes. But I flinched. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, the familiar shame of being related to these people. "We are leaving," my mother announced. "Alina, do not contact us again until you are done playing house with this filthy bricklayer. You are embarrassing the family name." They walked out, leaving us with 2 untouched coffees and a silence that screamed. That was the last time they saw him. They had looked at the sole heir to the Sterling fortune and seen a servant. They had dismissed a man who could buy their entire neighborhood with pocket change because he wasn't wearing a designer suit. Julian never complained about that day. He simply categorized them. In his mind, they moved from potential in-laws to threats, and Julian Sterling knew how to neutralize threats. 6 months ago, he flew me to a private island in the Cyclades. There was no construction dust there, only the endless blue of the Aegean Sea and white stone villas clinging to the cliffs. We had dinner on a terrace suspended over the water. When he knelt, he didn't present a simple band. He opened a velvet box to reveal a 15-carat pink diamond. It was flawless, rare, and worth more than the combined lifetime earnings of everyone I had ever known. "I don't want to hide anymore," he had said, slipping the ring onto my finger. "I want to give you the world, Alina, and I want everyone to know you belong to me, and I belong to you." We decided then and there the wedding would be at Sterling Manor. It was the crown jewel of his family's estates, a Gilded Age palace in the Hamptons that was usually closed to the public. It was a fortress of wealth and history. Planning the wedding had been a whirlwind of secrecy and luxury. We hired the best security teams in the world. We had non-disclosure agreements thicker than novels for every vendor. But the hardest part was the guest list. Sitting in our library 2 weeks ago, with the final guest list spread out on the mahogany desk, I had held a fountain pen over the H section. Hartwell, Margaret, Hartwell, Robert, Hartwell, Bianca. My hand trembled. It is a strange thing, mourning people who are still alive. It is a specific kind of grief to realize that your wedding day, the happiest day of your life, will be safer without your mother and father. "You don't have to do it if it hurts," Julian had said, standing behind my chair, his hands massaging my tense shoulders. "It hurts more to include them," I had whispered. "If they come, they will make it about them. They will criticize the flowers. They will ask you for loans. They will try to outshine me." "Then strike them out," Julian said firmly. "Family is who loves you, Alina, not just who shares your blood. My parents love you. My friends love you. You are building a new family. Don't let the old one burn it down." I drew a thick, black line through their names. One line, then another, until the ink bled through the paper. It felt like cutting off a limb, but it also felt like survival. We sent out the invitations, heavy cardstock with gold leaf edging, delivered by private courier to the elite of New York, senators, tech billionaires, artists, and the old guard of society, but no Hartwells. We locked the gates. We thought we were safe. I shook my head, bringing myself back to the present moment in the penthouse. Julian was still watching me, his expression unreadable but intense. The phone lay dead on the cushion, my digital shield against their toxicity. "You should check your work email," Julian said suddenly, his tone shifting from comforting to businesslike. I frowned. "Now it is 10 o'clock at night." "Just check it," he urged. "My security team flagged something on the Apex server a few minutes ago. It bypassed the standard spam filters because it was sent internally, or at least, it was masked to look like it was." I walked over to the desk where my laptop sat open. I tapped the spacebar, and the screen flared to life. There was one new message in my inbox. The subject line was blank. The sender was an alphanumeric string that looked like a burner address. My heart hammered against my ribs as I clicked it open. There was no text in the body of the email, just an attachment, a single image file, and a short, typed line underneath it. "I know what you are hiding, you bitch. You think you can fool the world, but you can't fool blood." I clicked the image. It was a blurry, zoomed-in photo, taken from what looked like a cell phone. It showed me standing in the fitting room of Vera Wang. My back to the camera, the reflection in the mirror was obscured, but the distinct, jagged birthmark on my right shoulder blade, the one shaped like a teardrop, was clearly visible. I was wearing a wedding dress. I felt the blood drain from my face. "Bianca," I whispered. "She knows," Julian said, coming up behind me to look at the screen. "Or at least, she suspects. She doesn't know who the groom is. She doesn't know the location, but she knows you are getting married." She thinks I'm lying, I realized, the pieces clicking together. She thinks I'm lying about being broke, or... I paused, remembering Bianca's twisted logic. "Or she thinks I am working there. She thinks I am modeling or staffing an event." "The email is a fishing expedition," Julian analyzed coldly. "She is trying to spook you. She wants a reaction." I stared at the hateful words on the screen. You can't fool blood. She was right. I couldn't fool blood. But I could certainly spill it, metaphorically speaking. If she wanted to hunt for the truth, she was going to find a predator she wasn't equipped to handle. Delete it, I said, closing the laptop with a snap. Let her wonder. Let her spin her wheels. If she thinks she can crash my life again, she is in for a rude awakening. Julian nodded, a dark promise in his eyes. She won't get within a mile of you. I have doubled the security detail for the venue. But Alina, he paused, making sure I was looking at him. If they do show up, if by some miracle of stupidity and malice they find us, are you ready? I looked at the man who had given me a 15-carat diamond and a love worth infinitely more. I thought of the black lines through my parents' names. I'm not just ready, I said. I'm waiting, while I was in the sanctuary of my penthouse, insulating myself with silence and the promise of a new future. My sister Bianca was living in a world that existed entirely within the 6-inch screen of her smartphone. If you scrolled through her Instagram feed, you would see a life of effortless luxury. You would see champagne brunches in Soho, unboxing videos of designer handbags, and vague inspirational captions about hustle culture and manifesting abundance. What you would not see were the eviction notices piled up on her kitchen counter. Hidden under a stack of fashion magazines, you would not see that the designer bags were high-quality counterfeits bought from a trunk in Chinatown, or that the champagne was actually cheap sparkling wine poured into a borrowed crystal flute. Bianca did not live in reality. She lived in the edit, and in her edit, she was the main character, and the world was simply an audience waiting to applaud. Her latest accessory was Todd. Todd was 32, wore suits that were too tight across the shoulders, and described himself as a crypto visionary and an alpha entrepreneur in reality. Todd was running a Ponzi scheme that was about 2 weeks away from collapsing. He drove a leased BMW he couldn't afford and spoke exclusively in buzzwords. To my parents, however, Todd was the second coming of Wall Street. He had dazzled them with graphs on his iPad that showed lines going up, and that was enough. They saw him as the antidote to the shame I had brought upon them, a man of ambition, unlike the carpenter they believed I was with. The chain of events that would lead them to my wedding began with a mistake so trivial it was almost laughable. I had been at the Vera Wang atelier for my final fitting 3 days prior. The boutique was closed to the public for my appointment, a standard courtesy for high-profile clients. I was standing on the pedestal, the silk and lace of my custom gown cascading around me like a waterfall of diamonds. For a brief moment, the heavy velvet curtain of the changing suite had been drawn back to let in natural light, so the seamstress could check the color match. In that split second, a woman walking her dog on Madison Avenue had snapped a photo through the window. She wasn't paparazzi. She was just a tourist excited to see a wedding dress. She posted it on her story, tagging the location. A friend of Bianca's from high school, a girl who followed me solely to hate-watch my life, saw the post. The tourist had captioned it, "Saw a bride at Vera Wang today. The dress must cost more than my house." The photo was blurry. My face was turned away, looking into the mirror which was obscured by the angle. But the back of the dress was low, cut in a deep V to accentuate my spine, and there, clearly visible against the pale skin of my right shoulder blade, was my birthmark. It is a distinct, dark mark shaped almost exactly like a teardrop. Bianca used to make fun of it when we were children, calling it a stain. Bianca saw the screenshot her friend sent. She zoomed in. She stared at that mark. "It is her," she told Todd. They were sitting in her cramped apartment, surrounded by takeout boxes. "That is Alina. That is the disgrace." Todd squinted at the screen. "I thought you said she was poor. I thought she was dating a laborer. That dress looks like serious money." "Babe," Bianca laughed, a harsh, dismissive sound. "She is poor, Todd. Look at her. She is standing there like a mannequin. She isn't the bride. She is working. Working. She is a designer, remember?" Bianca spun her narrative with the confidence of someone who believed her own lies. She probably got a job as an assistant for some high-end event planner. She is standing in for the real bride to check the hem or something, or maybe she is fixing the train. There is no way Alina is buying Vera Wang. She probably can't even afford the zipper. Todd's eyes lit up. To a grifter, every situation is an opportunity. Wait a minute. If she is working a wedding that requires a custom Vera Wang, that means money. Serious money. Who is the client? Bianca began to dig. She scoured the internet, cross-referencing the date of the photo with rumors in the New York event scene. Because Julian and I had been so fanatically secretive, there were no names attached to the wedding of the century taking place at Sterling Manor. There were only whispers: a billionaire recluse, a European royal, a tech mogul. The only confirmed detail was the venue Sterling Manor, the most exclusive, impenetrable estate on the East Coast. "It is at Sterling Manor," Bianca announced, her voice trembling with greed. "Do you know who owns that place, the Sterling family? They own half of Manhattan. If Alina is working that wedding, she has access." "We need to go," Todd said, sitting up straight. "Babe, this is it. This is the networking opportunity I have been waiting for. If we can get into that room, I can pitch my new coin to actual whales. We could walk out of there with millions in seed money." "But we aren't invited," Bianca said, though the wheels were already turning. "Alina is there," Todd countered. "She is staff. She can get us in the back door. She owes you, doesn't she? After everything she did to your family?" "She owes us everything," Bianca hissed. The narrative shifted instantly. I was no longer just her sister. I was her ticket. I was the employee who was going to smuggle them into paradise. Bianca called our parents immediately. She didn't tell them I was getting married. She told them I was catering, or organizing, a billionaire's party. She spun a tale that I had been hiding this job to keep the money for myself, refusing to help the family that raised me. "She is selfish, Mom," Bianca had wailed over the speakerphone. "She is rubbing elbows with the elite while you and Dad worry about the mortgage. We have to go there. We have to make her introduce Todd to these people. It is the least she can do to pay back the debt of raising her." My parents, desperate and delusional, agreed instantly. To them, my value was solely measured by what I could provide. If I wasn't providing cash, I had to provide access, while they were plotting. I was in my office at Apex Horizon, finalizing the floral arrangements. I was debating between white hydrangeas or orchids, completely unaware that my own flesh and blood were planning to invade my sanctuary. I was busy trying to ensure that the security protocols were tight, ironically worrying about paparazzi, never suspecting the threat would come from a rented sedan. But they still lacked one piece of the puzzle: the exact time and entry point. Sterling Manor is a fortress. You don't just walk up to the front gate. That was when the final betrayal happened. I had recently promoted a young, talented designer over a woman named Sarah, who had been with the company for 10 years but lacked vision. Sarah was bitter. She monitored my calendar. She saw the block of time marked Sterling Project, Final Execution. She saw the confidential memos I had carelessly left on my desk regarding the vendor entrance logistics. When Bianca, acting on a hunch, cold-called the Apex main line pretending to be my concerned sister looking to drop off medicine, the receptionist transferred her to Sarah. Sarah didn't give Bianca the information because she cared. She gave it to her because she wanted to see me squirm. She gave Bianca the date. She gave her the time. And most critically, she gave her the location of the service entrance used by the florists and caterers. "Tell her I said hello," Sarah had said before hanging up. Armed with this information, Bianca felt invincible. She sent me a text message on the morning of the wedding. I was in the bridal suite, wearing a silk robe, sipping lemon water to calm my nerves. My phone buzzed. I glanced at it, expecting a message from the planner or perhaps a sweet note from Julian. Instead, it was a number I didn't recognize, but the tone was unmistakable. "We know you are working the Sterling wedding. Don't try to hide. We are coming. Have 3 VIP passes ready at the gate. Todd needs to meet the investors. Don't disappoint us like you always do. Consider this your chance to redeem yourself." I stared at the screen. The audacity was so immense it was almost physical. They truly believed I was the help. They believed they could just demand entry to a $5 million event because they felt entitled to my labor. I didn't reply. I didn't get angry. I felt a cold, calm detachment. I tapped the block contact button. I didn't even finish reading the second sentence. I erased the message. I erased the thought of them. "Is everything all right?" my maid of honor asked, noticing my pause. "Spam," I said, setting the phone down. "Just spam." But outside the city, the gears of disaster were turning. My father had maxed out his last functioning credit card to rent a white Cadillac Escalade. They wanted to look the part. They wanted to roll up to Sterling Manor looking like they belonged, like they were titans of industry, not a family drowning in debt and resentment. Bianca spent 3 hours doing her makeup. She wore a dress that was too loud, too sequined, and entirely inappropriate for a black tie event, but she thought it screamed wealth. Todd put on a fake Rolex and practiced his elevator pitch in the rearview mirror. "We are going to own this place," Todd said as he merged onto the highway, driving aggressively. "Your sister better not screw this up." "She won't dare," my mother said from the back seat, adjusting her faux fur stole. "She knows her place. She knows she owes us." They drove toward the Hamptons with the radio blasting. High on their own delusions, they were convinced they were driving toward their salvation, toward a pot of gold that I was guarding. They had no idea they were driving straight into a hurricane. They thought they had power over me. They thought I was the same girl who had slept on an office floor in the cold. They didn't realize that while they were renting cars and faking lives, I had become the person who owned the road they were driving on. As the skyline of New York faded in their rearview mirror, they laughed and joked about how they would order me around, how they would make me fetch them drinks while Todd charmed the billionaires. I was just putting on my veil when they crossed the county line. The silk tulle floated around me like a cloud. I looked in the mirror and saw a woman who was done running. Let them come, I thought, though I didn't know they were actually en route. Let the world try to break in. Today, the gates were locked, and for the first time in my life, I held the key. But ignorance is bliss, only for so long. As the white Escalade sped closer to Sterling Manor, carrying 3 people fueled by envy and greed, the collision course was set. They were coming to crash a party, but they were about to crash into a reality that would destroy them. The air in the solarium of Sterling Manor tasted different than the air I had breathed for the first 24 years of my life. It did not smell of bleach and anxiety, nor did it carry the stale scent of obligation that permeated my childhood home. Here, the air was scented with night-blooming jasmine and the salt of the Atlantic Ocean, carrying with it a profound sense of peace that I was still learning how to accept. We were gathered for the rehearsal dinner, an intimate affair compared to the spectacle planned for tomorrow. There were no cameras, no press, and no pretenses. The room was filled with the soft clinking of silver against bone china and the low, rich hum of laughter. For the first time in my life, I was sitting at a table where I did not have to shrink myself to fit. Seated to my right was Eleanor Sterling. To the business world, she was a formidable philanthropist who sat on the boards of 3 museums. To me, she was the mother I had always yearned for, but never believed existed. She was elegant in a way that had nothing to do with her vintage Chanel suit, and everything to do with the way she looked at people as if she actually saw them. "Alina, dear," Eleanor said, placing her hand over mine. Her skin was cool and soft, like parchment. "You have barely touched your risotto. Are the nerves setting in?" I looked down at my plate. "A little," I admitted, my voice quiet. "I just keep waiting for something to go wrong. It feels too perfect." Eleanor signaled to the waitstaff to clear the plates. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a long velvet box. The conversation at the table dipped in volume, but not out of awkwardness. It was a respectful silence. Julian, sitting across from me, smiled. He knew what was coming. "I have something for you," Eleanor said. sliding the box across the white tablecloth. "This has been in the sterling vault for 60 years. My husband's mother wore it on her wedding day, and I wore it on mine. We discussed it, William and I, and we agreed that it belongs to you now." I opened the box with trembling fingers. Inside lay a necklace of sapphires and diamonds, the stones so large and heavy they seemed to pulse with their own light. It was a piece of history, a fortune resting on black velvet. "Eleanor," I gasped, feeling the weight of the moment press against my chest. "I cannot accept this. It is too much. I don't carry the name yet." Eleanor's expression softened, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. She leaned in closer, her voice firm and filled with a conviction that shook me to my core. "Listen to me, Alina. You do not need a piece of paper or a name change to be my daughter. You became my daughter 4 years ago." She paused, looking across the table at Julian, who was watching us with pride. "Julian told us about the time you were at that diner in Queens," Eleanor continued. "He told us how a group of men started making fun of his muddy boots and his work clothes. He told us how you, a girl half their size, stood up and told them that the man in those boots had more dignity in his little finger than they had in their entire bodies. You didn't know he was a sterling. You didn't know he could buy the building we were sitting in. You defended him because you loved him. That was the moment. Alina, that was when I knew you were the one." A single tear escaped my eye, tracking hot down my cheek. I had forgotten that moment. It had seemed so insignificant at the time, just a natural reaction to protecting the man I loved. I didn't know it had been my audition for a dynasty. "Thank you," I whispered, my throat tight. "I promise I will honor it." "You already honor us by being here," William Sterling rumbled from the head of the table. William was a giant of a man, with broad shoulders and a mane of silver hair. He was known as the Iron Lion of Wall Street, a man who could dismantle a corporation with a single phone call. But when he looked at me, his eyes crinkled with warmth. He raised his glass of vintage Cabernet. "To Alina," he toasted, his voice filling the room. "The heart of this house." "To Alina," the table echoed. As the dinner wound down and guests moved to the terrace for coffee, I found myself standing by the French doors, looking out at the manicured gardens illuminated by moonlight. The beauty was overwhelming, but the shadow of my past was long. I felt a familiar claw of anxiety scratching at my stomach. William appeared beside me, blocking out the chill of the night wind with his sheer presence. "You are thinking about them," he stated. It wasn't a question. I nodded, gripping my clutch tightly. "I can't help it, William. My sister and my parents are tenacious. I have this terrible feeling that they are going to find a way to ruin this. They always do. They are like a stain that won't wash out." William took a sip of his brandy, looking out into the darkness with the calm assessment of a general surveying a battlefield. "Alina, let me tell you something about power," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "Real power isn't about shouting or making scenes. Real power is silence. It is the ability to make problems disappear before they even reach the doorstep." He turned to me, placing a heavy, reassuring hand on my shoulder. "I have spent 40 years building a fortress around this family," he said. "Do you think I would let a couple of grifters from Connecticut breach my walls? I have seen the file on your family. I know about the debts. I know about the fraud. I know about the cruelty." I looked up at him, shocked. "You investigated them." "I protect what is mine," William said simply, "and you are mine now. No one touches a sterling daughter-in-law. I have a security detail at the perimeter that makes the Secret Service look like amateurs. If they show up, they will be handled. You will not see them. You will not hear them. You will only enjoy your day. Let me be the monster so you don't have to be." For the first time in 5 years, the knot of fear in my chest loosened. I wasn't fighting alone anymore. I had an army. Later that evening, after the parents had retired, Julian took my hand and led me up to the private library on the 3rd floor. The room smelled of old leather and beeswax. He walked over to the desk and picked up a thick manila envelope. I have one last wedding gift, he said, handing it to me. I didn't want to give this to you in front of everyone. It is just for us. I opened the envelope. Inside was a stack of legal documents. I scanned the first page, my eyes widening as I recognized the address. 14 Maple Drive. It was my childhood home, the house where I had been raised, the house where I had been told I was worthless, the house where I had been thrown out into the snow. You bought it, I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Julian, why I hate that house. Keep reading, he urged gently. I flipped to the second document. It wasn't a deed of ownership, it was a demolition order. I bought the mortgage from the bank 3 months ago, Julian explained, watching my face closely. Your parents were months behind on payments, so it was easy to acquire, but we aren't going to live there. Alina, next week, bulldozers are going to level it. Every room where you cried, every hallway where you felt small. It is all coming down. I stared at him, tears blurring my vision again. And then, Julian continued, pointing to the architectural rendering attached to the back, we are going to build this. The drawing showed a modern, light-filled structure made of glass and wood. The sign above the door read, the Alina Hartwell Center for Youth Arts. It will be a scholarship center for underprivileged kids who want to study design but can't afford it, Julian said. We are going to take the site of your trauma and turn it into the launching pad for the next generation of artists. You are going to change the narrative. Alina, that ground will no longer be where you lost your family. It will be where hundreds of kids find their future. I dropped the papers and threw my arms around his neck. Burying my face in his shoulder, I sobbed, not out of sadness, but out of a sheer, overwhelming sense of release. He hadn't just given me a gift. He had given me an exorcism. He had taken the darkest part of my history and turned it into light. I love you, I choked out. I love you so much. I know, he whispered into my hair. Now, go get some sleep. You have a $200,000 dress to wear tomorrow. The next morning, the sun rose over the Hamptons like a blessing. I stood in the bridal suite, surrounded by my team. The dress hung on a custom mannequin in the center of the room. It was a masterpiece of silk, tulle, and hand-stitched lace, designed specifically to highlight the strength of my silhouette. When I stepped into it, I didn't feel like a princess. Princesses are passive. I felt like a queen. I looked in the full-length mirror. The woman staring back was tall, poised, and radiating power. The sapphires around my neck caught the light, matching the fire in my eyes. I thought of the girl shivering in her office 5 years ago, wearing a coat that was too thin. She was gone. In her place stood a woman who commanded respect, a woman who was loved, a woman who was safe. You look, my maid of honor started, but she couldn't finish. She just wiped her eyes. I look ready, I said, smoothing the silk over my hips, while I was fastening the clasp of a bracelet that cost more than my father's entire pension fund. The contrast of my reality and my family's reality was playing out 50 miles west on the Long Island Expressway. Inside a rented white Escalade that smelled faintly of stale cigarettes and cheap air freshener, the Hartwell family was disintegrating. I told you to take the tunnel, Bianca screeched from the passenger seat, slapping the dashboard. Now we are stuck in traffic if we get there late. Todd won't have time to network before the ceremony. Shut up, Bianca, my father yelled, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. I am driving a car I am not insured for, on a credit card that is about to bounce, trying to get to a wedding we were not invited to. Give me a break. It is hot in here, my mother complained from the back, fanning herself with a crumpled road map. Todd, can't you do something about the air conditioning? Todd, squeezed into the back seat next to my mother, was sweating through his polyester suit. He was checking his phone frantically, watching the value of his scam coin plummet. Just drive, Bob, Todd snapped, dropping the charming facade. If we don't get to this billionaire, I am screwed. We all are. Don't talk to my father like that, Bianca yelled, turning around to glare at him. I will talk however I want, Todd yelled back, I am the only one with a plan here. You people are just riding my coattails." "Your coattails," my mother shrieked. "We are the ones with the connection. Alina is our daughter. She will listen to us." "She hates you." Todd laughed cruelly. "She probably has a restraining order." The car was filled with shouting, accusations, and the sour smell of desperation. They were a cage of rats fighting over a scrap of cheese that didn't exist. They were driving toward a fortress of love and dignity, bringing with them nothing but chaos and greed. Back at the manor, I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of fresh peonies. I was ready to walk down the aisle. I was ready to marry the love of my life, and I was ready to face whatever ghosts tried to cross the threshold. Because today, the ghosts didn't stand a chance. The morning sun did not just rise over Sterling Manor. It seemed to be summoned specifically to illuminate the 50 acres of manicured lawns, ancient oak trees, and the glittering expanse of the Atlantic Ocean beyond the cliffs. If my life had been a gritty documentary for the last 5 years, today was the high-definition, blockbuster finale. The estate had been transformed into a fortress of silk and steel. Security checkpoints were established 3 miles down the main road. Black SUVs, with tinted windows, patrolled the perimeter like silent sharks. The air above us buzzed with the rhythmic thrum of helicopters ferrying guests from Manhattan. These were not just guests. They were the architects of the modern world. I saw the CEO of a tech giant that rivaled Apple step out of a vintage Rolls-Royce. I saw a European princess adjusting her fascinator as she walked up the limestone steps. The driveway was a parking lot for vehicles that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. I was in the master suite, watching the arrival feed on a bank of monitors that had been discreetly installed behind a vanity mirror. My heart was beating a frantic rhythm against my ribs, not from fear of the commitment I was about to make, but from the adrenaline of the trap we had set. "Perimeter breach at Gate 1, a voice crackled over the secure radio frequency that Julian had insisted I monitor. "White Cadillac Escalade, rental plates, occupants are belligerent." I leaned closer to the screen. The camera zoomed in with terrifying clarity. There they were. The white SUV looked comically large and tacky amidst the stream of sleek Blacktown cars. It was stopped at the first iron gate, blocked by 2 armed guards who looked like they could bench press the vehicle itself. I watched as the driver's side window rolled down. My father's face was flushed red, a vein bulging in his neck. He was shouting, his hands gesturing wildly. Then, the rear door flew open. Bianca stepped out. She was wearing a neon pink dress that was tight enough to cut off her circulation, covered in sequins that caught the sun in a blinding, aggressive way. She marched up to the lead security officer, a man named Marcus, who was former Special Forces. "Do you know who I am?" I could hear her voice clearly through the high-fidelity microphone mounted on the gate. It was shrill, piercing the sophisticated hum of the morning. "My sister is Alina Hartwell. She is the lead event manager for this wedding. She is running this entire show." I flinched. The lie came so easily to her, in her mind. It was the only logical explanation for my presence here. I could not be the bride. Therefore, I must be the help. And if I was the help, she was entitled to the VIP treatment. "Ma'am, get back in the vehicle," Marcus said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "You are not on the guest list. Turn around immediately." "Call her," Bianca screamed, pointing a manicured finger at his chest. "Call Alina. Tell her Bianca is here. And if she doesn't let us in, I will cause a scene that will get her fired. Do you hear me? I will ruin her career." My mother leaned out the window, adding her voice to the cacophony. "We are her family. We are here to support her work. This is ridiculous." Marcus reached for his radio. I knew the protocol. He was about to order a tactical removal. He was about to have them arrested for trespassing. "Wait," Julian's voice cut through the comms channel. He was in the security command center in the basement, watching the same feed. "Marcus, stand down." "Sir," Marcus sounded confused. "They are hostile. They are creating a disturbance." "Let them in," Julian ordered. His voice was cold, devoid of any warmth. Direct them to the secondary holding area near the staff catering tent. Do not take them to the main entrance. Walk them through the service gardens. I want them inside the walls. Copy that, sir, Marcus replied, though I could hear the hesitation in his tone. I pressed the talk button on my own headset. Julian, what are you doing? I am giving you the choice. Alina. Julian replied. If we turn them away now, they go home victims. They spin a story about how the mean security guards wouldn't let them see their hardworking sister. But if we let them in, they see the truth. Do you want them gone, or do you want them to watch? I stared at the screen. Bianca was now smirking at Marcus, convinced her threat had worked. She adjusted her dress, looking triumphant. She thought she had won. Let them in, I whispered, but keep eyes on them. Constant surveillance. Done, Julian said. I watched as the heavy iron gates swung open. The white escalade rolled through, looking like an infected cell entering a healthy body. They were directed away from the Grand Way, flower-lined driveway, and toward a side road used for deliveries. When they parked, they didn't see the indignity of being shunted to the side. They saw it as special access. They climbed out of the car, their eyes wide with greed as they took in the sprawling estate. Look at this place, I heard Todd say. He was wearing a shiny gray suit and fake aviator sunglasses. Your sister really landed a big fish of a client. This is old money. She better get us into the main tent, Bianca sniffed, kicking at a piece of gravel with her heel. I am not standing out here with the florists. They began to walk, unescorted but heavily monitored, toward the main lawn. They passed a magnificent archway covered in 10,000 white roses. A masterpiece of floral design that had cost $50,000. Tacky, my mother commented, running her hand over the blooms. Too many flowers. It looks desperate. Alina always did have terrible taste. She probably convinced the client to do this. It screams new money, my father agreed, despite having $0 to his name. No class. They reached the edge of the secondary lawn, a buffer zone between the catering setup and the main ceremony seating. From there, they had a line of sight to the terrace where I was currently standing for a final photo check with my bridesmaids. I was facing away from them, but my silhouette was unmistakable. I was speaking to Chloe, my maid of honor, adjusting the strap of her dress. To a rational observer, it looked like a bride sharing a moment with her friend. To the Hartwells, it looked like a supervisor scolding an employee. There she is, Bianca said, pointing. Look at her, running around like a headless chicken. She's probably stressing about the napkin folds. She looks thin, my mother noted with a grim satisfaction. Work must be killing her. Good. She needs to learn what hard work is. Hey, Todd interrupted, his eyes scanning the crowd of guests gathering in the distance. Is that Elon? And that guy from the Senate Holy Cow? Bianca? Everyone is here. I need to get over there. Todd started to drift away from the group, clutching a stack of business cards in his sweaty palm. He had the hungry, desperate look of a wolf who smells blood. He began to move toward the VIP rope line, trying to blend in with a group of waiters carrying trays of champagne. Target 1 is moving, a security officer reported in my ear. Male subject attempting to breach Zone A. Shadow him, Julian ordered. If he tries to speak to anyone, intercept, but let him dangle for a moment. I turned away from the window, feeling a wave of nausea. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was a profound sense of violation. They were here, in my sanctuary, judging my taste, mocking my existence, and plotting to use my wedding as a networking event for a scam. A knock on the door made me jump. Chloe burst in, her face pale. Alina, she said, breathless. There is a problem at the secondary buffet. The one we set up for the overflow staff and the band. I know, I said, turning back to the monitors. My family. They are... Chloe hesitated, looking disgusted. They are making a scene. The caterers are terrified to say anything because they claim to be your family. But they are looting the place. Alina. I switched the camera feed to camera 4. which covered the outdoor catering station. What I saw made my blood turn to ice. My mother and father were standing by the raw bar, which was stocked with Maine lobsters, jumbo shrimp, and oysters. They weren't eating, they were taking. My mother had opened her large, fake Louis Vuitton tote bag. She was grabbing entire lobster tails with her bare hands, wrapping them in cocktail napkins, and shoving them into her purse. My father was taking handfuls of expensive cigars from a display box and stuffing them into his jacket pockets. Bianca was yelling at a waiter, demanding he bring her a bottle of Dom Perignon, not the cheap stuff they were serving. It was feral. It was grotesque. It was the behavior of people who had been hollowed out by their own entitlement until nothing was left but a gaping maw of greed. "They are stealing the food," I whispered, my hand flying to my mouth. "On my wedding day, they are stealing lobster." I felt a tremble start in my hands and spread to my knees. It was the old shame, the conditioned response to their behavior. I felt small. I felt dirty. I felt like the disgrace they had always named me. "Alina," Julian's voice was no longer in my ear. It was in the room. He had come up from the command center. He crossed the room in 2 strides and took my face in his hands. "Look at me," he commanded. I looked up. His eyes were fierce, burning with a protective rage that anchored me. "Do not look away," he said. "Do not feel shame for sins you did not commit. You are not them. You are Alina Sterling. You are the queen of this manor. You are the woman who built herself from nothing." He turned me toward the monitor, forcing me to watch the pathetic display on the screen. "Look at them," he said. "They are small. They are petty. They are thieves. And you have the power to decide their fate. We can have them escorted out the back gate right now. We can have them arrested. Or—" He paused, waiting for me to find my voice. I watched my mother shove another lobster tail into her bag, looking over her shoulder like a common shoplifter. I watched Bianca check her reflection in a spoon, oblivious to the fact that she was standing in a staff tent. If I kicked them out now, they would never understand. They would leave thinking I was just a mean employee who got lucky. They would leave with their narrative intact. They would leave thinking they were better than me. I stopped trembling. The shame evaporated, replaced by a cold, crystalline clarity. "No," I said, my voice steady and hard as a diamond. "Do not kick them out." Julian raised an eyebrow. "Alina." "Bring them in," I said. "Escort them to the main hall. Seat them in the back row, the very last row." "Are you sure?" Chloe asked, looking terrified. "They smell like shrimp." "I don't care," I said, turning to face them, my chin held high. "I want them to see the ceremony. I want them to see me walk down that aisle. I want them to see who is waiting for me at the altar. I want them to realize exactly what they threw away 5 years ago." I smoothed the front of my $200,000 dress. "They wanted a show," I said, a dangerous smile touching my lips. "Let's give them the performance of a lifetime." Julian grinned, a sharp, predatory expression that matched my own. He touched his earpiece. "Marcus," he said, "change of plan. Escort the guests to the main ballroom. Row Z. Make sure they have a clear view of the altar. The bride insists." The Great Hall of Sterling Manor had been transformed into something that transcended architecture and entered the realm of fantasy. It did not look like a room. It looked like the inside of a diamond. 10,000 white O'Hara roses, imported that morning from Ecuador, had been woven into living walls that climbed 30 feet toward the vaulted ceiling. They exhaled a perfume so rich and heady that it felt like breathing in pure romance. Suspended above us were 12 chandeliers, each dripping with thousands of Swarovski crystals. They had been angled with mathematical precision to catch the afternoon sun streaming through the clerestory windows, fracturing the light into a million dancing rainbows that played across the faces of the guests. And what a guest list it was! As I waited in the vestibule, hidden from view, I watched the monitors one last time. I saw a former president of the United States, chatting amiably with the lead actress of the highest-grossing film of the year. I saw tech moguls who could crash the stock market with a single tweet. I saw the true power brokers of the world, people who valued privacy and dignity above all else. They sat in gold Chiavari chairs, waiting for the woman they knew as the future mistress of this estate. Then there was the back row, Row Z. It was located right next to the drafty service doors, usually reserved for distant cousins or late arrivals. That was where Marcus, my head of security, had deposited the Hartwell family. I watched them on the screen, feeling a cold, calm satisfaction. They looked utterly incongruous. My mother was clutching her Louis Vuitton bag, the one bulging with stolen lobster tails, to her chest, as if she were afraid someone would snatch it. Her eyes darted around the room, assessing the jewelry of the women in front of her, calculating the net worth of the crowd. My father sat with his arms crossed, his face a mask of irritated impatience. Bianca was frantically typing on her phone, likely trying to tag herself at the location, oblivious to the fact that we had installed signal jammers to prevent unauthorized social media leaks. They were angry. I could see it in the set of their jaws. They felt disrespected. They believed they were the family of the staff manager, and therefore entitled to better seats. They were waiting for me to appear with a clipboard and a headset so they could snap their fingers at me. The heavy oak doors of the vestibule shielded me, but I could hear the shift in the atmosphere. The hum of conversation died down. The string quartet fell silent. A hush descended over the room, a heavy, expectant silence that vibrated in the floorboards. Then, the organ began to play. It was not a traditional wedding march. It was a soaring, majestic piece by Hans Zimmer that Julian and I had chosen for its power. It demanded attention. It demanded reverence. "Here we go," I whispered to myself. I signaled the coordinator. The side doors near the altar opened first. Julian walked out. I could not see him directly, but I had a clear view of the back row on my monitor. I saw the exact moment my father registered his face. Julian was not wearing the flannel shirts and work boots my family associated with Jay the Carpenter. He was wearing a bespoke Tom Ford tuxedo in midnight blue, tailored to within a millimeter of his life. He walked with the easy, predatory grace of a panther patrolling its territory. He stood at the altar, hands clasped, looking out over the crowd with an air of absolute command. My father's jaw literally dropped. He nudged my mother hard in the ribs. "Margaret," he hissed, loud enough that the person in front of him turned around to glare. Look at the altar." My mother squinted, adjusting her glasses. "Is that the boy, the construction worker?" "It is him," my father whispered, his face flushing with confusion. "What is he doing up there?" "He must be security," my mother concluded, her voice dripping with disdainful relief. "Look at how he is standing. He is guarding the priest. Or maybe he is a stand-in for the groom's lighting check. There is no way he is a guest. Look at him. He is still just a laborer in a rented suit." "Security," my father agreed, nodding. "That makes sense. Alina probably got him a job here. At least he is working for a change." Bianca rolled her eyes, not even looking up from her phone. "Who cares? He's still a loser. Where is Alina? I need a drink, and no one is serving back here." They were so blinded by their own prejudice that they could not see the truth standing 20 feet in front of them. They could not conceive of a world where the man I chose was anything other than beneath them. Then, the music swelled. The heavy double doors at the back of the hall, the doors right next to where they were sitting, began to groan open. Light flooded into the room. I stepped into the threshold. The collective intake of breath from 300 guests sounded like a sudden wind. The dress was a masterpiece of architectural silk, hugging my waist and then exploding into a cloud of hand-embroidered tulle, but it was the accessories that commanded the silence. On my head sat a tiara of white gold and diamonds, a piece from the sterling vault that had been worn by Julian's great-grandmother. Around my neck was the sapphire necklace Eleanor had given me. Blazing blue fire under the chandeliers. I was not a manager. I was not an assistant. I was the main event. I looked straight ahead, locking my eyes on Julian at the far end of the aisle. But in my peripheral vision, I saw the Hartwells. They were frozen. Bianca's phone slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the floor. She didn't pick it up. Her mouth hung open, her eyes wide and unblinking, staring at the tiara on my head. She looked like a fish gasping for air. My mother had risen halfway out of her seat, her face drained of all color. She looked at the dress, then at the jewels, then at me. She looked for the clipboard. She looked for the headset. There were none. There was only a bouquet of rare white orchids in my hands. But the final blow was yet to come. A man stepped out from the shadows of the vestibule to offer me his arm. He was tall, silver-haired, and radiated a terrifying amount of authority. It was William Sterling. My father let out a sound that was half choke, half whimper. William Sterling was his idol. My father had a framed magazine cover of William in his office. He had quoted William's business strategies for years. He knew William's face better than he knew his own. And now, William Sterling was smiling down at me with paternal pride, tucking my hand into the crook of his arm. "Ready, my dear?" William asked, his voice booming enough to be heard in the back row. "Ready, Dad," I replied, loud and clear. The word Dad hit my biological father like a physical slap. I saw him flinch. I saw his legs give out, forcing him to sit back down heavily in his chair. We began to walk. The aisle was long, a runway of white rose petals. Every step was a reclamation. I walked past the senators. I walked past the movie stars. I walked past the people who ran the world, and they all stood for me. They all turned to watch me. As I passed row Z, I slowed down. Just for a fraction of a second, I turned my head and looked directly at them. Bianca was shaking. Her hands were gripping the back of the chair in front of her so hard her knuckles were white. "Why?" I heard her whisper, her voice cracking with hysteria. "Why is she wearing that? Why is she walking with him?" "She is the bride," my mother breathed, the realization dawning on her with the horror of a nightmare. "Oh my God, she is the bride." "No," my father muttered, shaking his head in denial. "No, that is impossible. She is broke. She is a disgrace. This is a mistake. It is a prank." I turned my eyes back to the altar. I did not smile at them. I did not frown. I gave them nothing. I gave them the indifference of a statue. I reached the end of the aisle. William kissed my cheek, handed me to Julian, and took his seat in the front row, the seat of honor that should have been my father's. Julian took my hands. His grip was warm and solid. He looked at me with such intensity that the rest of the room faded away. But he knew the audience. He knew who was watching from the cheap seats. The priest began the ceremony. But when it came time for the vows, Julian turned slightly. He didn't just speak to me. He projected his voice so that it carried to the darkest corners of the room. "Alina," Julian said, his voice deep and resonant. "5 years ago, I found you in a cold office, wrapped in samples because you had nowhere else to go. You were broken. You were cast aside." I heard a gasp from the back of the room. He was going off script. He was telling the truth. "You had been told that you were worthless," Julian continued, his eyes never leaving mine. "You had been told that you were a disgrace because you refused to sell your soul. But the people who threw you away made a fatal calculation. They did not know the value of what they were holding." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "They saw a stone," Julian said. "I saw a diamond. They saw a burden. I saw a queen. Today, I don't just take you as my wife. I take you as the co-owner of my life, my heart, and everything that carries the Sterling name. I promise to be the family you deserved but never had. I promise that as long as I draw breath, you will never be cold again, you will never be hungry again, and you will never, ever be uninvited." He slipped the ring onto my finger. It was a platinum band encrusted with diamonds that matched the engagement ring. "I love you," he said. "I love you," I whispered back. The priest pronounced us husband and wife. Julian kissed me, and the room erupted in applause. The sound was deafening, but as I pulled away from the kiss and turned to face the crowd, my eyes went straight to the back row. The Hartwell family was sitting in a state of catatonic shock. My mother was weeping, but they were not tears of joy. They were tears of a woman realizing she had just lost a lottery ticket she didn't know she had. She was looking at the sapphire necklace, doing the math in her head, realizing that the Disgrace was wearing more money around her neck than my father had made in his entire career. Todd, the con artist, looked like he was about to vomit. He realized he had just tried to scam the wife of Julian Sterling. He was looking at the security guards lining the walls with a new, terrified understanding. And Bianca looked small. She looked shrunken. All the air had been let out of her. She sat in her tacky sequined dress, surrounded by billionaires, realizing that her rich lifestyle was a joke compared to the reality standing at the altar. She looked at me, and for the first time in her life, she didn't look down. She looked up. They knew. There was no confusion left. There was no staff manager theory to hide behind. The $5 million wedding was mine. The estate was mine. The power was mine. And they were just guests in row Z, clutching stolen lobster and facing a reckoning that was just beginning. The transition from the ceremony to the reception was usually the moment when guests exhaled, loosened their ties, and prepared for a night of celebration. But for me, it was the deep breath before the final plunge. The ceremony had been the revelation. The reception was going to be the execution. Most human beings, upon realizing they had crashed the wedding of a daughter they had disowned, abused, and insulted, would have fled. If they possessed even a single gram of shame, they would have crawled out the service entrance, driven their rented Escalade back to the agency, and vanished into the night. They would have been halfway to Connecticut by now, burning with humiliation. But the Hartwells were not most human beings. They were parasites, and parasites do not detach themselves when they find a fresh vein. They dig in deeper. As the guests moved from the Great Hall to the banquet pavilion, a massive structure of glass and silk erected on the south lawn, I watched my family through the reflection of a mirror in the hallway. They were not leaving. They were huddled in a corner near the coat check, vibrating with a frantic, manic energy. My mother was furiously reapplying her lipstick, using the reflection in a window pane. She was smoothing down her dress, fluffing her hair, and practicing a smile that looked more like a rictus of greed than an expression of joy. "Did you see that necklace?" I heard her hiss to my father. "That sapphire is the size of a pigeon egg, Bob. That alone could pay off the mortgage and buy a condo in Boca." "She married a Sterling," my father muttered, shaking his head as if he were trying to rearrange the reality in his brain to fit his wallet. "William Sterling's son, my God. We are in-laws to the Sterlings. Do you know what kind of doors this opens? I can get funding for the business. I can get into the club. We have to fix this," my mother commanded, snapping her compact shut. "Right now. We have to go in there and be the grieving, overjoyed parents. She is our daughter. She can't deny us in front of all these people. It would ruin her image. She needs us to complete the picture." "What about the things we said?" Bianca asked, her voice trembling slightly. She was the only one who seemed to grasp the precariousness of their position, though her motivation was purely selfish. She looked at me like she wanted to kill me. "She is emotional," my mother dismissed, waving her hand. "She is a bride. Brides are crazy. Plus, she is rich now. Rich people forgive everything if you play your cards right. We just need to remind her that we are family. Blood is thicker than water. Bianca, especially when that water is champagne." "And me?" Todd asked, adjusting his fake Rolex. "What is my play?" "You are the brother-in-law," my mother said. "Just smile and agree with everything. We are going to walk in there, take our seats at the head table, because that is where we belong, and we are going to celebrate our daughter." They truly believed it. They believed that 5 years of silence, the eviction on Christmas Eve, and the constant stream of insults could be erased by the proximity of a billion-dollar fortune. They thought money was a detergent that washed away sin. I walked into the reception hall with Julian. The room was a sea of candlelight and crystal. The tables were set with gold-rimmed plates and centerpieces that defied gravity. A jazz band was playing a soft, sophisticated rhythm. We took our seats at the sweetheart table, which was raised slightly on a dais, giving us a view of the entire room. To my right sat William and Eleanor, beaming with pride. To my left, the empty space where my parents should have been was occupied by my best friends. And then, I saw them. They were moving through the crowd like sharks navigating a reef. My mother led the charge, her chin up, a terrifyingly bright smile plastered on her face. My father followed, chest puffed out, nodding at people he didn't know, trying to act like a patriarch. Bianca and Todd trailed behind, looking less confident but equally determined. They were heading straight for us. They had to cross the dance floor to reach the dais. It was a long walk. I watched them shove past a senator, nearly knocking the drink out of his hand. I saw my mother step on the train of a famous designer's gown without apologizing. They had tunnel vision. They saw only the gold at the end of the rainbow. Two of Julian's personal security detail, massive men in black suits, stepped out from the shadows of the dais. They crossed their arms, forming a human wall at the base of the steps leading to our table. "Step back, please," I heard one of the guards say. "This area is restricted." My mother stopped, looking affronted. "Restricted? I am the mother of the bride. Get out of my way. You oaf." She tried to push past him. It was like a fly trying to move a mountain. The guard didn't budge. The commotion was starting to draw attention. Conversations at the nearby tables died down. Heads turned. The jazz band lowered their volume slightly. Sensing the tension, Julian looked at me, his hand covering mine on the table. "Do you want me to have them removed now? We can do it quietly." I looked at my mother, who was now raising her voice, causing a scene. She wanted a scene. She wanted to force my hand. She thought that if she made enough noise, I would crumble just to save face. "No," I said, picking up my glass of vintage champagne. "Let them up." "Alina," Julian asked. "Let them up," I repeated, my voice cold. "I want to look them in the eye." Julian nodded to the head of security. The guard tapped his earpiece and stepped aside. The dam broke. My mother rushed up the 3 steps to the dais, her heels clicking loudly on the wood. She didn't walk. She ran. She reached our table and threw her arms out wide, her face contorting into a mask of overwhelming, theatrical emotion. "Alina!" she wailed. It was a sound that was meant to be a cry of joy, but sounded like a banshee. "Oh, my baby girl, my beautiful bride." She lunged at me, intending to wrap me in a hug that would seal our reconciliation for the cameras she assumed were watching. I did not stand up. I did not open my arms. I simply rotated my chair slightly and raised my champagne glass, placing it effectively between her body and mine. It was a subtle barrier, but it was impenetrable. My mother froze, her arms still open, hovering awkwardly in the air. She looked down at me, confusion flickering in her eyes. "Alina," she said, her voice dropping the high pitch. "Honey, it is Mom. Give Mom a hug. We are so proud of you. We knew you would make it." The entire room was silent now. 300 of the most powerful people on the planet were watching this train wreck. They were smart people. They could read body language. They saw a woman desperate to claim a connection, and a bride who looked at her like she was a stranger. "Who are you?" I asked. My voice was not loud, but in the silence of the room, it carried like a bell. My mother blinked. "What, Alina? Don't be silly. I am your mother, Margaret. We came all this way to be with you." My mother. I took a slow sip of champagne, letting the bubbles burst on my tongue. "That is strange. I distinctly remember being told I didn't have a family 5 years ago. I remember being told I was a disgrace. I remember being told that if I didn't marry a loan shark's son, I was dead to you." I set the glass down with a sharp click. "So, I ask again, who are you?" Because the guest list for this wedding was very specific, and there are no Hartwells on it. My father stepped up, trying to salvage the situation with bluster. "Now, Alina, let's not do this here. We were harsh. We admit it. Parents make mistakes. But look at you. You did it. You married a Sterling. We are just here to celebrate your success. We are a family. You can't just erase biology. Biology is an accident, I said, looking him up and down. Family is a choice, and you made your choice when you threw my clothes into the snow on Christmas Eve. That was a long time ago, my mother pleaded, tears now streaming down her face, real tears this time, tears of frustration that her plan wasn't working. Why are you holding on to grudges? We are your parents. We gave you life. You gave me life, and then you tried to sell it. I corrected her, Bianca, who had been standing behind them, couldn't take it anymore. The rejection, the humiliation of standing there while I sat in a throne-like chair, wearing millions of dollars in jewels, broke her. The mask of the supportive sister shattered. Oh, stop the drama. Alina, Bianca screamed. She pushed past our mother and slammed her hand on the table. Rattling the silverware, the crowd gasped. Security moved forward, but Julian held up a hand to stop them. He wanted to hear this. You are so full of yourself, Bianca spat. Her face twisted with envy. Look at you. You are sitting here dripping in diamonds, marrying a billionaire, and you are going to let your own parents starve. You are going to let me struggle with debt while you live in a palace. It is disgusting. You owe us. We raised you. You are rich now, you selfish bitch. The least you can do is write a check. There it was, the truth. Naked, ugly, and screaming for everyone to hear. You owe us, Bianca repeated, her voice cracking. You have everything. We have nothing. It isn't fair. I looked at my sister. I didn't feel anger. I felt pity. She was so hollow that she thought fairness was about things. I don't owe you a dime, I said softly. I paid my debts. I paid them every time I covered for you. I paid them every time I gave you my paycheck. And I paid the final installment the night I walked away and built this life without asking you for a single crumb. You are a monster, my mother sobbed, realizing the money was slipping away. How can you be so cold? Julian stood up. The movement was slow, deliberate, and terrifying. He unfolded his 6'3" frame and towered over them. He buttoned his tuxedo jacket with one hand, his eyes never leaving my father's face. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. You speak of coldness, Julian said. His voice was a low rumble, like thunder on the horizon. You stand here, in my house, at my wedding, and you dare to call my wife cold. He stepped around the table and stood next to me. Placing a hand on the back of my chair, it was a gesture of ownership and protection. You define family by what you can extract from it, Julian continued, addressing my father. You see a daughter as an asset to be liquidated. You see a sister as a bank account to be drained. That is not family. That is a parasitic infection. Now see here, young man. My father tried to bluster, but his voice shook. You don't know the whole story. We were just trying to teach her responsibility. I know the whole story, Julian cut him off. I know every chapter. I know about the loans you took out in her name. I know about the emotional blackmail, and I know about the night you kicked her out. We had to, my mother stammered. It was for the family's good. For the family's good, Julian repeated, tasting the words like they were poison. You threw a 24-year-old woman onto the street in a blizzard because she wouldn't marry a criminal to pay off your gambling debts. And you call that family? The room was deadly silent. The guests were hanging on every word. This was not just a wedding drama. This was a public trial. She is my wife now, Julian said, his voice rising slightly, echoing off the glass walls. She is a Sterling, and in this family. We protect our own. We do not exploit them. You can't treat us like this, Bianca shrieked, desperate to regain control. We are the victims here. She abandoned us. Julian laughed. It was a dark, humorless sound. Abandoned you, he asked. Is that the story you have been telling yourselves? Is that the lie you tell your friends? That Alina ran away? That she turned her back on you? He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small remote control. He turned toward the massive projection screen behind the stage, which had been set up to show a montage of our childhood photos later in the evening. "I think it is time we corrected the record," Julian said. "I think it is time the world saw exactly what kind of family you are." He looked at me. "Are you ready?" I stood up, smoothing my dress. I looked at my parents, who were now huddled together, sensing that something terrible was about to happen. They looked small. They looked frightened. "Show them," I said. Julian pressed the button. The lights in the ballroom dimmed. The giant screen flickered to life. It wasn't a slideshow of happy memories. It was a grainy, time-stamped video feed in black and white. The date stamp in the corner read December 24th, 2021, 8:30 p.m. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her throat. She recognized the front porch. She recognized the wreath. And she recognized the people standing there. "Ladies and gentlemen," Julian announced, his voice ringing out over the darkness, "I invite you to watch a short film titled The Truth." The giant LED screen that dominated the back wall of the ballroom, which had been displaying a tasteful loop of our monogram and falling rose petals, dissolved into static. A low hum of confusion rippled through the crowd. But it was silenced the moment the image sharpened into focus. It was not a professionally edited wedding montage. It was raw, grainy, black and white footage. The timestamp in the lower right corner glowed ominous in green December 24th, 2021. I heard my mother inhale sharply, a sound like a balloon being punctured. She knew that angle. It was the security camera mounted above the garage of my childhood home. A camera my father had installed to catch package thieves, but had instead captured the theft of my dignity. On the screen, the front door of the house flew open. A figure, me, 5 years younger, thinner, wearing a coat that looked like a rag against the biting wind, stumbled out backward. I wasn't walking. I was being shoved. Then came the audio. Julian had hired forensic audio engineers to clean up the recording, removing the wind noise so that every word rang out with crystal clarity through the concert-quality speakers of the ballroom. "And don't come back until you learn some respect." It was my father's voice, on the screen. He stood in the doorway, red-faced and heaving. He threw my suitcase, down the front steps. It hit the icy pavement, burst open, and scattered my clothes across the snow. A sweater landed in a slush puddle. A framed photo of my grandmother shattered. The audience in the ballroom gasped. It was a collective, visceral reaction. These were people who protected their families fiercely. To see a father treat a daughter like refuse was a violation of their most basic codes. But the video didn't stop there. It cut to a montage of cell phone videos and voicemail recordings. The screen showed Bianca, younger and smirking, filming me from her bedroom window as I gathered my clothes from the snow. Her voice, tinny and cruel, narrated the scene. "Look at her." The on-screen Bianca laughed. "The princess is finally out. Hey, loser, don't freeze to death. Actually, go ahead. If you are gone, the inheritance is mine. I get the house. I get the cars. Bye-bye." Disgrace. Then came the voicemails. Julian had synced them to play over black screens with just the date displayed. "Beep. Alina, it is Bianca. Mom says you got a promotion. We need $5,000 for a vacation. Don't lie and say you don't have it. Send it, or I will call your boss and tell them you're a thief. Beep. You are such a selfish bitch. Alina, Dad is sick because of you. He is stressed because you won't help us. If he has a heart attack, it is murder. And it is on your hands. Beep. I saw you with that construction worker today. Seriously, you are dating the help. You are an embarrassment. Do us a favor and change your last name so we don't have to be associated with your failure." The audio cut out. The screen went black. The lights in the ballroom slowly rose. But the atmosphere had changed completely. The warmth was gone. In its place was a cold, hard judgment. 300 pairs of eyes were fixed on the table in the center of the room. They weren't looking at me anymore. They were looking at the Hartwells. My mother was shaking her head frantically, her hands covering her mouth. My father was staring at the tablecloth, his face the color of ash. Bianca looked like she had been slapped. The silence was broken by a scrape of a chair. It was Todd. The crypto-visionary stood up slowly. He looked at the screen. Then he looked at the billionaires surrounding him, the potential investors he had hoped to schmooze. He saw the look of absolute revulsion on their faces. He realized that being associated with this family was not a networking opportunity. It was social suicide. "You lied to me," Todd said. His voice was loud in the quiet room. Bianca whipped her head around. "Todd, baby. No. It is fake. They edited it. It is AI." "Shut up," Todd snapped, stepping away from her as if she were radioactive. "You told me she was the black sheep. You told me she was crazy. You didn't tell me you people were monsters." "Todd, please," my mother begged, reaching out to grab his sleeve. "We can explain. It was a misunderstanding." Todd jerked his arm away. "Don't touch me. I don't know you people. I was scammed just like everyone else." He looked at Julian, raising his hands in a gesture of surrender. "Mr. Sterling, I had no idea," Todd said, his voice trembling. "I am leaving. Immediately. I want nothing to do with this." He didn't wait for permission. He turned and practically ran toward the exit, abandoning his fiancée and her parents in the center of the wreckage. Bianca watched him go. She watched the last potential lifeline of her fake, glamorous life walk out the door. The illusion she had built, the rich boyfriend, the high status. The victim narrative crumbled into dust in a matter of seconds. And then, she snapped. A primal scream tore from her throat. It wasn't a scream of sorrow. It was a scream of pure, unadulterated rage. She didn't blame herself for the voicemails. She didn't blame herself for the bullying. She blamed me for showing it. "You ruined everything!" Bianca shrieked. She grabbed a steak knife from the table. The room erupted in shouts. Bianca lunged toward the dais, her eyes wild, the silver blade glinting in the candlelight. She moved fast, fueled by the adrenaline of total humiliation. "I hate you!" she screamed, closing the distance. "I wish you had died in the snow." I didn't flinch. I didn't even stand up. I just watched her come. She made it exactly 3 steps, before she could even get within striking distance. A blur of motion intercepted her. Marcus, the head of security, didn't tackle her. He neutralized her. He caught her wrist in midair, twisting it with professional precision until the knife clattered harmlessly to the floor. In one fluid motion, he spun her around and pinned her arms behind her back. "Let me go," Bianca thrashed, kicking and screaming like a toddler. But Marcus held her immobile. "Secure the subject," Julian ordered calmly, not even rising from his seat. 2 more guards stepped forward to assist, surrounding Bianca. My mother let out a wail and collapsed into her chair, burying her face in the tablecloth. But my father did something worse. He didn't fight. He didn't scream. He calculated. He saw his daughter being restrained. He saw his wife weeping, and he saw me the victor. He realized that intimidation wouldn't work. He realized that lies wouldn't work. So he played the last card in his deck, pity. My father pushed his chair back and walked toward the dais. He moved slowly, hunched over, looking every inch the frail, beaten old man. He stopped at the bottom of the stairs, right in front of where Julian and I sat. And then, Robert Hartwell, a man who had never apologized for anything in his life, fell to his knees. A ripple of shock went through the crowd. "Alina," he croaked, looking up at me with watery eyes. He clasped his hands together in a begging gesture. "Alina, please, look at what is happening. Your sister is sick. Your mother is distraught. We are a mess without you." I looked down at him. From this angle, he looked so small. It was pathetic. "I am sorry. Alina," he sobbed, the tears flowing freely now. "I failed you. I admit it. But you have to understand I was under so much pressure. Your mother drove me to it. Bianca is so demanding. I just wanted peace. I didn't want to throw you out. They made me do it." I felt a flash of nausea. Even in his apology, he was a coward. He was throwing his wife and daughter under the bus to save his own skin. Please, Pumpkin. He used the childhood nickname he hadn't spoken in 20 years. Forgive your old dad. I am an old man. I don't have much time left. Don't let me die knowing my daughter hates me. We can fix this. You have so much now, surely you can spare a little mercy for your flesh and blood. The room waited. This was the moment in the movies where the heroine softens. This was the moment where she cries, hugs her father, and says that family is everything. But this was not a movie. This was my life, and I remembered the sound of the deadbolt sliding shut on Christmas Eve. I stood up slowly. I walked to the edge of the dais and looked down at the man kneeling on the parquet floor. Stand up, I said. My voice was ice. You are embarrassing yourself. He blinked, confused by the lack of warmth. Alina, you say Mom made you do it, I said, my voice projecting clearly to the back of the room. You say Bianca made you do it. You paint yourself as a victim in your own house, but you were the father, weren't you? You were the one whose name was on the deed. You were the one who was supposed to protect me. I leaned forward slightly. You are not a victim. Robert, you are an accomplice. Actually, you are worse, because when they were screaming at me, you were silent. When they were demanding my money, you looked the other way. And when they told you to throw me out, you opened the door. I pointed at the screen, which was now black. That man in the video, the one throwing the suitcase, that wasn't Mom. That wasn't Bianca. That was you. Your hands. Your choice. I was weak, he stammered. No, I corrected him. You were greedy. You thought I was a bad investment because I wouldn't marry for money. And now that I have money, suddenly I am your daughter again. You don't love me. You love the proximity to power. I straightened up, looking at the security guards holding Bianca, and my mother sobbing in the background. I do not forgive you, I said, and I do not accept your apology, because it is not an apology, it is an invoice. My father slumped, realizing the gambit had failed. He looked at Julian, hoping for male solidarity. Mr. Sterling, he pleaded, you are a man of business. You understand family legacy. Surely you can't let her do this. Julian stood up then. He buttoned his jacket and walked to the edge of the stage to stand beside me. He didn't look at my father with anger. He looked at him with the cold detachment of an executioner. You are right. Mr. Hartwell, Julian said smoothly, I am a man of business, and in business, we mitigate risk. You and your family are a liability. Julian raised his hand, signaling the tech team. The house lights came up to full brightness, exposing the Hartwells in all their misery. I have an announcement to make, Julian said, his voice booming. He looked out at the guests, the CEOs, the investors, the bankers, the power players of the American economy. Everyone in this room knows how the Sterling Group operates, Julian began. We value loyalty, we value integrity, and we value the safety of our partners. He pointed a finger at the Hartwell trio. These people, Robert, Margaret, and Bianca Hartwell, are enemies of my house. They have attempted to defraud my wife. They have abused her. And today, they attempted to disrupt our union with violence. He paused, letting the weight of his next words settle. So let me be clear, effective immediately. The Sterling Group and all its subsidiaries are implementing a total embargo on the Hartwell family. Furthermore, any bank, any investment firm, or any contractor that chooses to do business with Robert Hartwell or his associates will be immediately blacklisted by Sterling Global. A gasp went through the room. This was not just a snub, this was a death sentence. Julian was telling the entire financial ecosystem of the East Coast that if they lent my father $1, they would lose the Sterling business. No, my father whispered, his face turning gray. You can't do that. You will bankrupt me. You are already bankrupt, Julian said coldly. I am just making sure no one is foolish enough to bail you out. Julian turned to the security team. Get them out of my sight. Marcus hauled Bianca to her feet. She was sobbing now, broken and defeated. Two other guards hoisted my father up by his armpits. My mother was guided firmly toward the exit. They were dragged past the tables of the elite, past the people they had tried to impress, past the world they wanted to belong to. They were paraded out in a walk of shame that would be whispered about in New York society for 50 years. I watched them go. I watched the doors swing shut behind them. The room was silent for a heartbeat. Then, William Sterling, my father-in-law, stood up from his seat in the front row. He began to clap. Slowly, then all at once, the entire room joined in. It wasn't polite applause. It was a thunderous ovation. They were applauding the justice. They were applauding the strength it took to cut out the rot. I looked at Julian. He took my hand and kissed the knuckles. "It is done," he said. "It is done," I replied. And for the first time in 29 years, the silence in my head wasn't empty. It was free. The applause that had erupted following Julian's declaration was still echoing in the rafters of the great hall. But I raised my hand, signaling for silence. The room obeyed instantly. The sound died down, replaced by a heavy, expectant hush. The security team had paused near the massive double doors. My parents and Bianca were frozen there, framed by the exit, looking back at me with a mixture of terror and pathetic hope. They were waiting for the punchline. They were waiting for me to say it was all a lesson, to invite them back in, to give them a seat at the table. They still believed, deep in their delusional hearts, that I was the same girl who used to apologize for taking up too much space. I stepped down from the dais. I did not need Julian to hold my hand for this. I did not need the guards to protect me. I walked across the dance floor, my silk train whispering against the polished wood. I stopped 10 feet away from them. I held the microphone loosely in my hand. I did not feel the urge to cry. For years, I had cried rivers over these people. I had cried until my eyes were swollen and my throat was raw. But tears are a language of connection, a signal of distress that hopes for comfort. I knew now that there was no comfort to be found in the Hartwell name. There was only consumption. "Wait," I said into the microphone. My voice was calm, steady, and amplified to reach every corner of the estate. "Before you leave, there is one last thing we need to clarify." My mother straightened up slightly. Wiping her mascara-stained cheeks, she sniffed, a flicker of calculation returning to her eyes. She thought I was cracking. She thought I was about to offer them a consolidation prize. "You called me a disgrace," I said, looking directly at her. "For 5 years. That word has haunted me. You branded me with it because I refused to sell my body to save your reputation. You decided that my dignity was a currency you were entitled to spend." I took a step closer. "But tonight, I want you to look around this room. Look at the people sitting here. Look at the man standing behind me. Look at the life I have built from the ashes of the fire you started." I gestured to the glittering assembly of guests, who were watching with rapt attention. "You were not excluded from this wedding because I hate you," I continued, my voice dropping an octave, becoming sharper, like a blade freshly whetted. "Hate is a passion. Hate requires energy. I do not have energy for you. You were excluded because you are emotional tourists. You wanted to visit a destination you tried to destroy. You wanted to drink the wine from a vineyard you salted. You do not get to enjoy the shade of the tree you tried to cut down." My father opened his mouth to speak, to offer some weak defense. But I silenced him with a look. "You think you are owed something," I said. "You stood here and demanded that I pay you back for raising me. You demanded a check. You demanded access. You demanded gratitude." I reached into the hidden pocket of my gown, a practical design choice I had insisted on, and pulled out a thick cream-colored envelope. It was sealed with the sterling wax crest. "I agree," I said. "Debts should be paid. Ledgers should be balanced." Hope flared in my father's eyes. He saw the envelope. He saw the thickness of it. He assumed it was a check. He assumed it was the hush money, the payoff to make them go away quietly. He practically lunged forward as I held it out. "Take it," I said. He grabbed it with trembling hands. He tore it open, his fingers clumsy with greed. My mother leaned over his shoulder, her eyes wide. Bianca stopped struggling against the guards, craning her neck to see the number. My father pulled out the document. It was not a check. It was a legal demand for payment, an invoice. "What is this?" my father stammered, staring at the columns of numbers. "That," I explained, my voice ringing with judicial finality, "is a comprehensive accounting of every single dollar I gave you from the day I turned 18 until the day you kicked me out. It includes the rent I paid while living in the attic. It includes the car payments I made for Bianca. It includes the loans I took out to cover your gambling debts. And, thanks to the very expensive lawyers my husband employs, it includes 5 years of compound interest calculated at the maximum legal rate." My mother gasped, reading the figure at the bottom of the page. $500,000. She shrieked. "You are insane. We don't have this kind of money." "I know you don't," I said coldly, "but you have a house, or rather, you have a house that is currently leveraged to the hilt. This document is a formal notice. You have 30 days to repay the principal and interest in full. And if we don't," Bianca challenged, though her voice was weak, "you can't get blood from a stone." "If you don't pay within 30 days, I said, leaning in so only they in the front row could hear the steel in my tone, "my legal team will file a suit to seize your assets. We will take the house. We will take the cars. We will garnish your pensions. We will strip you down to the very last button, just like you did to me on Christmas Eve." I signaled to the head of security. "Get them out," I ordered. "And if they ever step foot within a 10-mile radius of me or my husband again, have them arrested for trespassing and harassment." "No, Alina, you can't," my mother screamed as Marcus grabbed her arm. "We are your parents. You can't sue your own parents." "I am not suing my parents," I said, turning my back on them. "I am collecting a debt from a bad investment." The guards moved with synchronized precision. They didn't drag them. They escorted them with a force that brooked no resistance. My family was swept out of the great hall like debris being cleared after a storm. The heavy oak doors began to close. For a brief second, I caught a glimpse of the world outside. It was twilight. The wind was whipping the trees, and the air looked biting and cold. Inside, the room was bathed in the warm, golden glow of the chandeliers. The smell of roses and expensive perfume filled the air. The music was about to start again. The contrast was absolute. I was in the light. They were in the dark. The doors slammed shut with a final, resonant boom that felt like the closing of a coffin lid. The sound of the lock clicking into place was the most beautiful music I had ever heard. Outside, in the gravel parking lot, the facade of the Hartwell family disintegrated completely. I did not see it, but Marcus reported it to me later. The moment the heavy doors shut them out, the moment the warmth of the manor was replaced by the chill of the Atlantic wind, the shock wore off and the panic set in. They stood by the rented Escalade, holding the invoice that promised their financial ruin. The reality of the situation crashed down on them. There was no billionaire son-in-law. There was no networking. There was no bailout. There was only a $500,000 debt and a 30-day clock ticking down to homelessness. "You idiot!" my mother screamed, turning on my father. She swung her heavy handbag and hit him in the chest. I told you we should have been nicer. I told you we pushed too hard." "You told me," my father roared back, his face purple with rage. "You were the one who said she was a gold mine. You were the one who told me to throw her out that night. You said she needed tough love to break her spirit. This is your fault. Margaret, you poisoned her against us." "Shut up, both of you," Bianca shrieked, kicking the tire of the SUV. "What about me? What am I supposed to do? Todd left me. I have no money. I have nowhere to go." "You," my mother spun on her daughter, her eyes wild. "You are the reason we are here. If you hadn't been so jealous, if you hadn't sent those voicemails, they wouldn't have had that video." "You stupid, selfish little brat." She slapped Bianca. It was a sharp, cracking sound that echoed in the empty lot. Bianca stumbled back, holding her cheek, looking at her mother with pure hatred. "I hate you," she hissed. "I wish Alina had taken me with her. I wish I was anyone but your daughter." "Get in the car," my father commanded, his voice shaking. "We have to go. We have to figure out how to hide the assets before the lawyers come." "There are no assets, Bob," my mother wailed, collapsing against the hood of the car. "We have nothing. It is over." They clawed at each other, screaming into the wind, tearing each other apart in the darkness, while the lights of Sterling Manor blazed on the hill above them, unreachable and indifferent. They were alone in the cold, trapped in the prison of their own making. Inside, the atmosphere had shifted. The tension that had gripped the room during the confrontation evaporated, replaced by a sense of collective relief. The guests knew they had witnessed something necessary. They had seen a boundary drawn in blood and sealed in gold. I stood in the center of the room for a moment, taking a deep breath. My lungs expanded fully, no longer constricted by the corset of guilt I had worn for 29 years. I felt a hand on my waist. I turned to see Julian. He didn't look like the titan of industry who had just destroyed a family. He looked like my husband. His eyes were soft, filled with an infinite depth of understanding. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. Ignoring the hundreds of people watching us, I looked at the closed doors. I thought about the invoice. I thought about the demolition order for the house on Maple Drive waiting in the safe upstairs. I thought about the little girl who used to hide in the closet to escape the shouting. I realized I couldn't hear her crying anymore. She was gone. I had saved her. "I am more than okay," I said, a genuine smile spreading across my face. "I am free." Julian pulled me closer, his forehead resting against mine. "Is it done?" "It is done," I whispered. "Then let's dance," he said. He signaled the band. The conductor raised his baton. The opening notes of At Last by Etta James floated through the air, soulful and triumphant. Julian swept me onto the dance floor. As we moved, the heavy silk of my dress swirled around us. The guests blurred into a kaleidoscope of color and light. I rested my head on his shoulder, closing my eyes. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't waiting for the criticism. I wasn't waiting for the rejection. I was exactly where I belonged, in the arms of the man who saw me when I was invisible, surrounded by a fortress of love that no amount of envy could breach. The disgrace was dead. Long live the Queen. The music swelled, filling the cavernous space of the great hall with the rich, soulful notes of the string orchestra. Julian's hand was firm on my waist, guiding me to the center of the floor as we began to move, stepping into the rhythm of the waltz. I felt a physical sensation that was entirely new to me. It was a lightness so profound it was almost disorienting. For 29 years, gravity had worked differently on me than on other people. I had walked through life carrying the invisible lead weights of expectation, guilt, and the crushing need to please people who could not be pleased. I had walked with a stoop, metaphorically bowing my head to avoid the blows. But as I spun in the arms of my husband, the hem of my silk gown flaring out like a white peony in bloom, I realized the weights were gone. They had been left outside in the cold gravel lot, clutching a bill they could not pay. I was weightless. I was floating. I looked up at Julian, the lights of the chandeliers reflected in his dark eyes, which were fixed on me with an expression of absolute adoration. "You look like you are flying," he whispered, pulling me slightly closer. "I feel like I've been holding my breath since I was 5 years old," I confessed, my voice barely audible over the music, and I just exhaled. "Breathe, Alina," he said, spinning me again. "Just breathe. This air belongs to you now." We danced until the world blurred into streaks of gold and crystal. I didn't see the senators or the movie stars. I didn't see the press cameras flashing from the designated media zone. I only saw him. We were a universe of two, orbiting a center of gravity that we had created ourselves. When the music finally faded, and the applause washed over us like a warm tide, We made our way to the edge of the dance floor. William Sterling was waiting for us. He held 2 crystal flutes of champagne. He handed one to Julian and one to me. His face crinkled in a smile that reached his eyes. "That was quite an exit," William said, his voice a low rumble. "In all my years of boardroom battles and hostile takeovers, I don't think I have ever seen a negotiation concluded quite so decisively." I looked down at my glass, a sudden flicker of doubt passing through me. Was it too much? Was I too cruel? William placed a heavy, comforting hand on my shoulder. The weight of it was grounding. "Alina, look at me," he commanded gently. I met his gaze. It was the gaze of a titan, a man who had built an empire. But in that moment, it was purely paternal. "Cruelty is attacking the defenseless," William said. "What you did was self-defense. You simply held up a mirror. If they did not like the reflection, that is not the fault of the glass." He clinked his glass against mine. "My dear girl, I want you to remember something. I have watched many people climb the ladder of success. Most fall because they are looking down, worried about where they came from. They let their roots strangle them." He paused, looking toward the heavy doors that barred the past from the present. "Your value does not lie in where you were born," William said, his voice thick with conviction. "It does not lie in the name you were given by accident of birth. Your value lies in where you choose to stand. And today, you chose to stand in the light. Today, you stand at the summit. Do not ever let anyone drag you back down to the valley." "Thank you, William," I whispered, tears prickling my eyes, not tears of sadness, but of gratitude for the father figure I had finally found. "Call me Dad," he said with a wink. "I think you have earned it." The night blurred into a celebration of pure joy. But the true ending of this story, or perhaps the true beginning, did not happen under the chandeliers of Sterling Manor. It happened 365 days later. It was a crisp afternoon in late December. The sky was a piercing, brilliant blue, the kind that makes the skyscrapers of New York look like they are carved from ice. I was standing on the sidewalk of a quiet street in Connecticut. But it wasn't quiet anymore. The air was filled with the sound of children laughing and the rhythmic scrape of violins being tuned. I looked up at the building in front of me. It was a stunning piece of modern architecture, all clean lines, warm cedar wood, and floor-to-ceiling glass that flooded the interior with natural light. Above the entrance, in brushed steel letters, read the name, the Alina Hartwell Center for Youth Arts. This was 14 Maple Drive. 1 year ago, this plot of land had held a gloomy, drafty colonial house with peeling paint and a front door that had been slammed in my face. It had been a monument to my misery. Now, the house was gone. It had been razed to the foundation. The earth churned and purified, and this sanctuary had risen in its place. "It looks even better than the renderings," Julian said, stepping up beside me and slipping his gloved hand into mine. "It looks like the opposite of what it was," I said. "It looks like hope." We walked inside. The lobby was bright and welcoming. Through the glass walls of the studios, I could see a group of teenagers painting on easels. In another room, a girl was learning to play the cello. These were kids from the foster system, kids from low-income families, kids who had been told, like I was, that art was a waste of time, that they were burdens. Here, they were scholars, they were artists, they were valued. We walked through the halls, greeting the teachers. As we reached the director's office, we found our lawyer, Mr. Henderson, waiting for us with a quarterly report. "The enrollment is up 20%, Henderson said, shaking Julian's hand. "The community response has been overwhelming. We are already looking at opening a second branch in the Bronx." "Excellent," Julian said. "Whatever resources you need, you have them." "There is one other matter," Henderson said, his tone shifting slightly as he pulled a thinner file from his briefcase. "You asked for an update on the former occupants of this address." I stiffened slightly. Even after a year, the ghost still had a faint echo. "Tell me," I said. Henderson opened the file. The foreclosure on this property was finalized 31 days after the wedding. Your parents sold the house to the Sterling Trust to settle the $500,000 debt. It was the only way to avoid a lawsuit they knew they would lose. And where are they now? I asked. They separated 3 months later, Henderson replied without emotion. Your father moved into a studio apartment in a rough neighborhood near the industrial park. He is working as a night watchman. He has tried to contact the office several times to ask for a meeting with you, but per your instructions, he was blocked. Good, I said. And your mother? Julian asked. Living in a state-subsidized senior housing facility 2 towns over, Henderson said. She is isolated. The neighbors have filed complaints about her. Apparently, she tells anyone who will listen that her daughter is a billionaire who stole her house. But nobody believes her. They think she is senile. And Bianca? I asked the question I was most curious about. Henderson allowed himself a small, grim smile. Bianca Hartwell is currently working double shifts as a waitress at a diner on the interstate. She is also facing 3 counts of petty fraud related to an online clothing scam she tried to run. Her fiancé, Todd, turned state's witness against her to save his own skin. She is drowning in legal fees. She is, for lack of a better word, finished. I listened to the report. I expected to feel triumph. I expected to feel a surge of vindictive glee, but I didn't. I felt nothing. It was just information. It was like hearing the weather report for a city I no longer lived in. Thank you, Henderson, I said. That will be all. We left the center as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the street. We didn't get into a car. Instead, we walked to the nearby helipad where the chopper was waiting to take us back to the city. An hour later, we were standing on the private terrace of our penthouse, 80 stories above Manhattan. The city was a grid of diamonds below us. Pulsating with life, the wind whipped my hair around my face, but I wasn't cold. I was wearing a coat of cashmere and the invincible armor of self-respect. I leaned against the glass railing, looking down at the millions of lives playing out below. You know, I said, turning to Julian, I used to hate that word, disgrace. Julian rested his elbows on the railing beside me. It is a hateful word. It is, I agreed. But tonight, thinking about them, thinking about where they are and where I am, I realized something. What is that? If they hadn't called me a disgrace, I said slowly, piecing the thought together, I might have stayed. I might have tried to make it work. I might have married that loan shark just to please them. I might have lived a small, miserable life trying to buy their love. I looked at him, tracing the line of his jaw with my eyes. That word was the knife that cut the cord, I said. They called me a disgrace, and it hurt so much that I ran. I ran so far and so fast that I ran right into you. That word didn't destroy me. Julian, it liberated me. Julian smiled, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear. Then I suppose we should send them a thank you card. Let's not go that far, I laughed. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small object. It was a bracelet, a tarnished silver chain with a few cheap charms on it. It had belonged to my grandmother, but my mother had given it to me the day I turned 16. She had told me, wear this so you never forget that you owe everything to this family. This is your chain. I had kept it in a jewelry box for years, even after the wedding. It was the last physical artifact I had from them. I held it up to the city lights. It looked pathetic now. Cheap metal, heavy memories. What is that? Julian asked. The past, I said. I held my hand out over the railing. The wind buffeted my arm. 80 stories down. The traffic was a river of red and white light. They told me this was my chain, I whispered to the wind. They were right, but I am not a prisoner anymore. I opened my fingers. The silver caught the light for a brief second as it fell. Then it was swallowed by the darkness, plummeting down to the concrete jungle below, to be lost in the trash, to be swept away, to be forgotten. I didn't watch it hit the ground. I didn't need to. I turned back to Julian. He wrapped his arms around me, pulling me into the warmth of his chest. "Ready to go inside?" he asked. "Dinner is ready." "I am ready," I said. I took one last look at the horizon, where the sun had fully disappeared, leaving only the bright electric glow of the future. We walked back into the penthouse, and I slid the glass door shut behind us. The wind stopped howling. The cold was locked out. I had invited many things into my life in the last year. I had invited love. I had invited success. I had invited peace. But as I looked at the empty space where the bracelet used to be, I knew what I would never invite again. Don't ever invite the past to your future. It has no seat at the table. It has no bed in the house. It has no voice in the conversation. And if it tries to show up, if it bangs on the door demanding entry, make sure you are strong enough to change the locks. Because the only people who belong in your life are the ones who help you build it, not the ones who tried to tear it down. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope Alina's journey gave you a sense of satisfaction and reminded you that your value is something you define, not something others can take away. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Are you tuning in from the bustling streets of New York, the sunny coast of California, or perhaps somewhere across the ocean? Please leave a comment below with your location and let me know what you thought of Alina's revenge. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to BitterSweet Drama Stories, hit that like button, and smash the hype button to help this video reach more people who need to hear that justice is always possible. See you in the next story.